Hi, Heather. I assume you'll be sitting in for the first half?
Exactly.
Exactly. Thank you. We can hear you and see you as well. Thanks. Okay, Mr. Rubin, we are all set. We can start.
All right. Well, greetings to everyone. My name is Ruben Collins. I'm president and chair of the Transportation Planning Board, and I call this virtual meeting to order. I trust you all are able to see and hear me very clearly. Most of our staff will be participating in the meeting in the COG building. So if you have any issues with your audio connection, please email Conti or Lynn. Before we proceed with the roll call and public comments, for the benefit of those observing this meeting on the TPB's YouTube channel, I'd like to kind of give you an understanding of how the meeting will be facilitated. During all agenda items, I will have the presenters complete their briefing and then turn to members for questions or comments. I will call on members by jurisdiction. When I call on your jurisdiction, you could speak by starting with your name, or you can use the raised hand icon and staff will help to identify you. There are no action items on the agenda today, and as such, I'll not be calling for a vote on any item during the entire meeting. With that stated, we'll now begin with the actual roll call and public comments.
Great, thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. I am going to ask for, I'll state your agency or jurisdiction. If you could state your name, we'll capture you. We're also monitoring the participant chat as well. So, and I do know of a couple people that are going to be late. So let's start with District Council Brooke Pinto. District Council Charles Allen. District Council Heather Edelman.
Here.
Thanks. Miss Henderson's arriving a little bit late. Thanks. District Department of Transportation.
Anna Chamberlain here.
Thanks. District Office of Planning.
Rebecca Schwartzman present.
Thanks, Rebecca. Moving on to Maryland, City of Bowie. Charles County.
Here.
Thanks. College Park. Frederick County.
Mark Mishler present.
Thanks. City of Frederick. So I know Kelly's got a conflict. Mr. Edmiston is on his way. City of Gaithersburg. City of Greenbelt. City of Laurel. Montgomery County.
Gary Arnrich is present.
Thanks, Gary. Anyone else? Montgomery County? Prince George's County?
Shay Olabenle present.
Thanks, Olshay. Anyone else from Prince George's County? City of Rockville?
Bridget Newton is present.
Thanks, Bridget. Tacoma Park?
Shayna Fulcher present.
Thanks, Shayna. Maryland Department of Transportation?
Heather Murphy here.
Thanks, Heather. Maryland House of Delegates?
Delegate Chris Fair here, and Delegate Corman will be on later.
Great, perfect, thank you. Moving to Virginia, City of Alexandria. Arlington County. City of Fairfax.
Tom Ross, City of Fairfax.
Okay, great. I think I saw Catherine Reed too.
Yeah, cool.
Great, thanks. Fairfax County.
James Walkinshaw's here.
Thanks, James. Anyone else from Fairfax County? I think Mr. Alcorn actually is on vacation, or he had a conflict. Falls Church.
Dave Snyder here for Falls Church. Hello, everyone.
Thanks. Thank you. Fauquier County. Loudoun County.
Kristen Umstadt is here from Loudoun County.
Thank
Rob
you.
Donaldson is also here.
Gotcha, Rob. City of Manassas.
Pam Sabeski. Hello, everybody.
Hello. City of Manassas Park. Prince William County.
And Wheeler
Frank, we
here.
here.
Gotcha both. All right, cool. Virginia Department of Transportation.
John Lynch here.
Thank you. Virginia House of Delegates. Virginia Senate. Thank you. WMATA.
Mark Phillips, alternate here.
Thank you. Our ex officio members, Federal Highway Administration. Federal Transit Administration. National Capital Planning Commission.
Julia Coster is here. Thank you.
Hi, Julia. Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority. And National Park Service.
Hi, Laurel Hammock here.
Great, thank you. All right, that concludes roll call. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Lynn. And could you summarize the comments we received from the public?
Great, thank you. So between noon, Tuesday, October 17th, and noon on Tuesday, November 14th, the TPB received 4 comments submitted by email and 20 project-specific comments from the Visualize 2050 Initial Project List feedback form. A summary, as well as each comment, can be found on our meeting webpage. So as you know, we've created a project list feedback form on the comment page to help share specific project comments with project sponsors for Visualize 2050. We've been sharing the comments twice a month, both here at TPB and at Tech, as our agencies are working on their project inputs. The comment period closes on November 30th. All the comments we've received have been attached to our memo. So due to timing, I'm going to ask for you guys to read through the comments yourselves, and you'll get a summary when that comment period closes as well. So we'll briefly summarize the rest of the comments now. The summary starts on page 3 of the PDF, and all of the comments again are attached on our meeting page. So we received a comment via email from Joseph Shirazi, who is a member of the City of Falls Church Environmental Sustainability Council. He noted that the Falls Church City Council recently adopted new greenhouse gas emission reductions targets of net zero emissions by 2045. He expressed his support for the bus rapid transit project on Route 7 to meet greenhouse gas goals and transportation needs of the community. George Aburn, who calls himself a member of a DC EJ coalition, shared comments asking, first, how the TPB is addressing climate justice and air quality hotspots associated with transportation projects, and second, if the TPB will change their climate plan to achieve updated goals that he recommends. He also submitted a letter that he shared with MWAC and CPC regarding environmental justice in the region. Kevin O'Brien submitted comments and a letter via email on behalf of WABA and CSG. So O'Brien, who is the Virginia organizer with the Washington Area Bicyclists Association, submitted comments about the TPB's performance-based planning and programming, draft highway safety targets, and suggestions for Visualize 2050. Their comments express concern about the 15% increase in non-motorist fatalities and serious injuries over the past 5 years and ask the TPB to make safety investments a higher priority in their Visualize 2050 project submissions. They also offer a different definition of what regionally significant projects could mean, although for our conformity purposes, the TPB is required to use a specific federal definition. Lastly, Bill Pugh, who is a senior policy fellow for the Coalition for Smarter Growth, provided comments about road fatality trends and the safety benefits of narrower lanes. CSG expressed concern about the rise in traffic deaths and asks TPB members to make safety investments for vulnerable road users a higher priority in their Visualize 2050 project submissions. The letter also references a study from Johns Hopkins University about the safety benefits of narrower 9 to 10 foot wide lanes. So as I mentioned, all the comments are found on our meeting page. That concludes my report. Thank you, Chair Collins.
And thank you, Lynn. The next item on the agenda is approval of the October 18th, 2023 minutes. So I'm seeking a motion for approval, and if you could please state your name and as part of your the motion, please, to assist staff.
Mr. Chairman, just before the motion, I just wanted to make an edit to the minutes. This is James Walkinshaw.
Yes, sir.
I was present on the meeting in person on October 18th, which I don't think is reflected in the minutes, so just wanted to add that.
Thank you, sir.
And if no one else has any changes, I'm happy to make a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
Thank you. And is there a second?
Delegate Chris Fair, second.
It's been moved and properly second. Are there any nays or abstentions at this time? Seeing that there are none, it appears that the motion to pass the minutes does pass. The next item on the agenda is a technical committee report. Mr. Rawlings, are you here today?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I am here. Good afternoon.
How are you?
Fine, thank you, sir. The technical committee met on Friday, November the 3rd. A written meeting summary is included with your meeting materials, so I'll keep this report brief. 3 items were reviewed for inclusion on today's board agenda. These included staff reported on the draft regional targets for transit safety and highway safety. Staff reported on the selection process for projects to be funded, proposed for funding under the 2023 Enhanced Mobility Grant Program, and staff provided an update on Visualize 2050. In addition, 3 items were presented for information and discussion. This included a briefing on the new motor vehicle emissions budget approved by the Metropolitan Washington Air Quality Committee, a status report on the National Capital Trail Network, and an update on the TPB Regional Resiliency Program. That concludes my report, Mr. Chairman. I'd be happy to take any questions.
And thank you, Mr. Rawlings. Are there any questions for Mark at this time? Okay, again, are there any questions from the District of Columbia, State of Maryland, Virginia, or other agencies? All right. Well, again, thank you. So the next agenda item is the Community Advisory Committee report. I know Mr. Wallace said he was here, but he's on his phone. But can you hear us, Mr. Wallace?
Yes, sir. Loud and clear. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Chair Collins. The Community Advisory Committee met virtually on Thursday, November 9th. We had a great session with the TPB member officers. Thank you again, Chair, and everyone who showed up there. I really appreciated that. The committee heard remarks from Chair Collins, Second Vice Chair Walkinshaw, and Vice Chair Christina Henderson's legislative chair, Gabrielle Rogoff. I will not go into all of our notes because they're as part of the minutes that we provided earlier. But we had a great time. We broke into 3 working group sessions, if I would call it that, and great ideas were exchanged and so forth. The groups that we broke into was broken up by DC, Maryland, and Virginia. And it was a very spirited, very insightful ideas that were exchanged, and we really appreciated that as we go forward into the new year, which is pretty soon. This is what, November? The new year will start pretty soon. Our next CAC meeting will be held December 14th, and that will be virtually also. And that commences my inputs for the day. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. And I wanted to give Mr. Walkinshaw and Gabriel as well an opportunity to share thoughts on our participation, which I thought was rather exciting today. And Mr. Walkinshaw, I don't know if you had any comments you wanted to share.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Collins. Yeah, we had a really robust dialogue with the Virginia CAC members, and they had some great questions and great thoughts. So, I certainly left it with some new insight based on, their their expertise and their knowledge and their participation. So I thought it was a really great session. Thank you.
Thank you. And on behalf of Councilman Henderson, I think you said Gabrielle is here.
Oh, hi, this is Heather, and
Hey, hello, how are you?
I'm
sorry about that.
Collins. Thanks for letting me just step in for a second. My colleague, as you guys mentioned, Gabrielle Rogoff, who's our legislative director, joined the CAC meeting, and really appreciate. She actually worked with Councilmember Henderson on drafting transportation-related legislation. So super helpful for her to meet with the CAC members. Obviously, top of mind for them and us in our office is WMATA funding issue. Also, they discussed bus lanes and bike lanes, the disjointed bike lane issue that we deal with often as bikers, monitoring transportation projects and how quickly they are developed. All love to our my DDOT colleagues here. And also ways to keep drivers accountable for traffic violations, which is something that Councilmember Henderson is very focused on. So very helpful for Gabrielle to talk with these folks, and appreciated being invited. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just wanted to briefly share the actual working group that included the state of Maryland, which I participated in. I thought a strong focus was on how the CAC can reestablish itself and actually have more of an impact on the actual direction that the TPP goes in terms of policy, and because from my understanding and perspective, CAC provides a great opportunity for direct discussion being created through the various communities that make up COG, and it's an opportunity for us to hear directly from the citizens. And so a part of our discussion was actually talking about how can we raise opportunities for that type of dialogue to be a part of future meetings and discussions as it relates to the TPB. So I thought that was very interesting, and I think that's something, as we go forward, that we actually start looking at how we can create more opportunities for that direct dialogue. So again, I want to thank all the members of the CAC for inviting me, and as well as the vice chairs to be participants. And before we close out this part, are there any questions for Mr. Wallace from the District of Columbia, from the state of Maryland, from the Commonwealth, or any other agencies? Right. Well, again, thank you all.
Thank you.
The next item is the director's report and steering committee actions.
Thank you, Chair Collins. I'm going to step in for a minute. Conti left him on his desk, so he'll be right back. I am going to start with some of the things he was going to talk about anyway. So I want to remind everyone about the COG Annual Awards Luncheon, which is December 13th. If you came to the COG building last month, you would have received a flyer on it. If not, we sent out an email that enables you to click to it. And meanwhile, Conti has returned. So that's all I got to do was the COG Annual Awards.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members of the board. A detailed report was included in your packet. I will briefly review the contents, and I do have a few additional items that were not in the report. The steering committee met on November 3rd and approved 2 amendments. The first amendment was at the request of the District Department of Transportation to replace federal STBG funds with Federal Highway Safety Improvement Fund, and to add additional highway safety improvement funds to the district's traffic signal maintenance and traffic safety input programs. And the details are on pages 11 through 17. The second amendment was at the request of Virginia Department of Transportation to add funding for a Duke Street Transit Enhancement Project and also to add funding for the Dallas West Boulevard Phase 2 project. And the details are on pages 18 through 23. Members will recall being briefed by the 3 state DOTs last month on the draft statewide carbon reduction strategy document that the states are required to submit to the US DOT by close of business today, in fact. We received 2 sets of comments on the draft documents. One was from WMATA, which you can see on pages 5 through 7, and another one from the Coalition for Smarter Growth, and you can see their comments on pages 9 through 10. The steering committee was briefed about these comments, and these comments were shared with the state DOTs, urging them to consider these comments as they finalize the carbon reduction strategy plan before submitting them to the US DOT. Staff also issued 2 letters of support from the TPB, both to Loudoun County, for 2 transit projects that the county is seeking Commonwealth-wide transit grants for zero or reduced fare program and another grant to build an ADA-compliant bus stop. Details of that are on pages 26 and 27. I'm also glad to report that the staff has now unveiled a new searchable database on the TPB's webpage, where users can see all of the projects that have been funded through the TPB's Transportation Land Use Connections grant, through the Regional Roadway Safety Program grants, and the Transit Within Reach grant programs. Also, the webpage now hosts a recording of a webinar that staff conducted on November 2nd that showcased a variety of projects funded by the TLC and Regional Roadway Safety grants. It was a very well-attended webinar. About 80+ people were in attendance. Also included in the mail-out package, starting on page 29, is a staff summary of the regional level discussions that the Council of Governments has been facilitating about WMATA's funding situation for its operations in fiscal year 2025. I would encourage members to familiarize themselves with this summary, and Eric and I will be happy to schedule a call with members for additional details if there's any interest. The latest status of the WMATA's FY 2025 operating funding situation is that WMATA has been busy examining all means of actions that could be taken to fill or to cover the deficit gap. And WMATA has identified 5 scenarios for its operations, and this would be operating the rail, bus, and the metro access service. All 5 scenarios include some one-time savings of funding, and they also include some ongoing savings that WMATA has identified through its own internal cost reduction reviews. The 5 scenarios range from the worst case, which would include severe service cuts together with some fare increases, to a more manageable or targeted service reductions accompanied with fare increases. And also the scenarios include transferring some capital funds or funding that's generally used for capital projects to operations. The funding amounts estimated for these 5 scenarios are still being refined, but the concepts that these scenarios present are pretty much what the board will be working with, the WMATA board will be working with. No decision has been made by the WMATA board on the scenarios. We are also planning to have the WMATA staff brief the TPB about this matter next month. And now a few additional announcements that are not part of the written report. The TPB's Regional Roadway Safety Program, one of the projects that received this grant award was in the city of Alexandria. And that project has been selected by the Chesapeake and Potomac section of the Institute of Transportation Engineers to receive a special award. The project is intended to develop design improvements at two high crash intersections along Duke Street, and it supports Alexandria's implementation of its Vision Zero action plan. So we are very pleased that the industry is recognizing these sorts of design efforts. This fall, the fall edition of the Street Smart Pedestrian and Bicycle Safety Outreach Campaign officially was kicked off on Wednesday, October 25th at the Vienna Metro Rail Station. Special shout out to Mr. Walkinshaw and Mr. Alcorn, TPB board members who were there and who spoke, and also Mr. Jeff McKay and Mr. Lusk, who are also the alternates of TPB who were there, and a number of Fairfax County officials and VDOT officials were there. Park and I were able to attend, and it turned out to be a very sunny, pleasant day to be out, but reminding people that fall is the season where, due to the daylight issue, we all need to be all the more mindful and watchful for pedestrians and bicyclists on the roadways. The Maryland Department of Transportation will be holding open house meetings for the American Legion Bridge and I-270 corridor program. The meetings have in fact started. The first one was held in Bethesda, November 13th. There's a meeting today, I understand, in Gaithersburg, and another meeting in Frederick on the 16th, and one more in Rockville on December 2nd. More information about this open house is available at AmericanLegionBridge270.com. The last item, the nation is celebrating Geography Awareness Week, and today happens to be GIS Day. So happy GIS Day. It is a day where we acknowledge the many applications of geographic information systems technology, and we encourage others to learn more about the data. Over the years, TPB staff have developed several GIS-based applications and tools supporting various TPB plans and programs. Some of the examples of these include the highway pavement and bridge conditions, a series of maps documenting the demographic characteristics of the equity emphasis areas. We have also been developing story maps using data collected by our member agencies. For example, recently we unveiled a tool that shows the average weekday Metro Rail ridership going all the way back to 2010. All of the GIS resources related to TPB's work may be accessed on the TPB's website under the TPB Resource and Applications page. I welcome members to spend some time familiarizing themselves with it. And a chat to the GIS tools. In the chat, there is a link that Charlene Howard, our staff, has provided. The last item, Mr. Chair and members of the board, it's on a sobering news. This month marks the 10th anniversary of Ron Kirby's passing. Members may remember Ron Kirby as the executive director of the TPB, and as well as the COGS Transportation Planning Department director from 1987 to 2013. And he led the TPB and COGS staff in supporting transportation decision-making in the region. Ron Kirby was known for his intellect, his professionalism, his passion for his work and his collegial and collaborative nature. He has been described as an unfailingly fair, very thoughtful manager. He spoke at conferences around the country alongside fellow experts. He always valued community input, and he hosted countless conferences, workshops, and meetings on all sorts of topics. We invite you to visit our Ron Kirby webpage on the COG website to learn more about him. In my humble opinion, as much as any other figure in our region, Ron Kirby helped advance the idea of the TPB as the forum where area decision makers come together to solve problems. And he helped the TPB carve out its place as the impartial authority on transportation in the region. And on a personal note, I've benefited. He was my mentor for close to 20 years, and I really miss him on a daily basis. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Kanti. For all the members here, I'm going to provide an opportunity for questions for Kanti directly. Are there any questions? Okay, again, thank you for that report. Right, this will be my next to the last meeting as chair, so I'm want to first thank everyone. This has been a ride. I mean, it's exciting in a lot of ways, but I continue to look forward to being a part of TPB as time progresses. There are a few things I'd like to speak on at this time. First off, I'd like to congratulate on behalf of the TPB members who recently won re-election, and starting with the state of Virginia, Jeff McKay, James Wilkinshaw, who is, the vice chair, Walter Alcorn, Rodney Lusk, Matthew and State Senator David. I'm sorry?
And that was Matt Letourneau from Loudoun County.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. And State Senator David Marston. And from the state of Maryland, Neil Harris, Rodney Roberts, and Dennis Mitchell. And hopefully I got everyone. But the purpose is to congratulate those that were successful. Trust me, I know what it likes to go through an election. So believe me, I just want to share my thanks. I'd like to also let you know, consistent with the TPB bylaws, I will be convening a nominating committee to bring to this board a slate of candidates for the chair and 2 vice chair positions for next year. I want to thank Bridget Newton, Pamela Sabisky, and Charles Allen for agreeing to serve on the nominating board. The board will be electing its officers at its December 20th meeting. At that time, Conti will be assisting the nominating committee. The last item I'd like to bring up is bidding goodbye and happy retirement to our colleague, John Lynch of the Virginia Department of Transportation. John has served as a member of this board representing the Commonwealth since 2021, but he's been with VDOT for over 25 years, serving in various roles, including as its mega projects director, district construction engineer, and district location and design engineer. He is retiring as the Northern Virginia District Administrator. Some of the projects that John has been involved in is the Fairfax County Parkway, the Woodrow Wilson Bridge, the Springfield Interchange, Route 29 Gainesville, I-495 Express Lanes, and the I-95 Express Lanes. John, at this time, we'd like to thank you for your service to the region, and we'd like to wish you much happiness in your retirement. So I'm told it's telling me that I will be handing over the plaque to you, John, but that doesn't seem possible right now. But you certainly, like we can see on the screen, a certificate of appreciation for you that reads the National Capital Region Transportation Planning Board at the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments hereby presents this recognition of gratitude and esteem to John Lynch for your distinguished service to the TPB and people of the region as Transportation Planning Board member 2021 through 2023 and the TPB Steering Committee member 2021 through 2023. At this time, John, if you'd like to share a few thoughts.
Well, thank you very much. And I just had the plaque delivered via transponder, so I have it with me now. I appreciate the recognition, and it's been my pleasure to serve on this board and to serve the region for a couple decades. And in the private sector, I was also working with VDOT on different projects. So it's been a great career, and I look forward to some relaxation and rest, and then figure out what I want to do with the rest of my life and career. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We're going to, as I stated, there's no actual voting items today, but we'll conclude the rest of the meeting with some informational items. The first is a PBPP targets for transit safety and highway safety. We will be updating the safety targets we previously established for the region's roadways and transit systems. We will be presented with proposed updates at this meeting and will be asked to adopt these updated targets during our December meeting. We should have been provided with copies of the presentation and information memo. We'll begin with Eric Randall, who will be giving a briefing on updates to the transit safety targets. And then Janai Nam will brief us on updates to the roadway safety targets. And after these two briefings, Jordan Holt with WMATA will brief us on the safety performance of WMATA. So at this time, Eric, if you could get us started.
Right. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm here to open the item today on the draft annual regional transit and highway safety targets, part of the federally required performance-based planning and programming process. So I'll be speaking about the transit safety items. I'll be followed by my colleague Janie Nam talking about the highway safety items, and then by Ms. Jordan Holt from Metro, who will talk about some of the actions that Metro takes in regard to safety performance and improving their safety outcomes. And again, this follows up with last year's when we had the DOTs in to talk about highway safety. We thought we'd change it up a little bit this year. So as a reminder, performance-based planning and programming is a strategic data-driven approach. It's supposed to be based on the science and the best information out there, and using the information from setting targets and observing performance against those targets to make investment and policy decisions to achieve performance goals. Generally, for the whole PBBP framework, there are two options for MPOs to set targets. We either adopt regional targets or we support statewide targets. Given the size and structure of the National Capital Region, embracing the 3 states, if you will, we've consistently developed and adopted our own regional targets in coordination with DOTs and transit agencies. And again, thank you to the DOT and transit agency staff who help us put this information together and assemble it. Speaking briefly to the transit safety information item, I'll review the requirements, the 4 performance measures, to whom those performance measures apply, the targets that were approved by this board a year ago, the data we do have available on safety performance, and then the draft targets for 2023 that you will be asked to approve in a final form next month in December. So there's a host of federal rulemakings out, at least 5, affecting provider of public transportation or transit agency safety. Under one set of rulemakings, agencies have to develop and certify an agency safety plan. So again, the chief executive or the general manager has to sign off on the agency safety plan every few years. A subset of the safety plan rule is that providers have to annually set targets for 4 transit safety performance measures. Following that, we have up to 180 days to adopt regional targets for the metropolitan planning area, and that's what we're here to present to you today. Here are the 4 transit safety performance measures. They're really almost groups of performance measures at this point. As you'll see with the highway safety, very similar targets in some respects. We have a target for fatalities, the total number, and then the rate per total vehicle revenue mile. So that's the doors open to service, if you will, for every revenue vehicle or every transit vehicle by mode. So different modes, urban bus, commuter bus, streetcar, heavy rail, and so forth. We have to set separate targets for each, so it comes out as a table. Similarly, we do this for reportable injuries. So again, somewhat different definitions than what you'll see for highway safety, but again, what's set forth for the transit agencies. Then safety events, you can see them listed there. And lastly, system reliability, the distance between major mechanical failures. So how often a vehicle breaks down on its trip. So these rulemakings actually don't apply to every single provider of public transportation because not everybody in the region gets federal Section 5307 funding. That specifically is urban transit assistance funds. The agencies that do get it in this region are Metro, and it operates 3 modes there: Metro Rail, Metro Bus, and Metro Access. DDOT, Maryland Transit Administration with the commuter bus service into this area, and PRTC. In addition, we do have the Maryland local transit agencies get federal assistance flowing through the MTA, and those include Vango, Transit, Ride-On, and the bus. You do not see the local Virginia systems up there because they do not get, as a recipient or subrecipient, local Section 5307 funding, even though some of them may get other federal funding, for instance, by electric vehicles. Here at the TPB, we take all the data from each of the applicable agencies. We total up the numbers for each performer or provider and then calculate the numbers for the region as a whole. At this time, we do not make any adjustment. We depend on the agencies to set the targets based on the information they know best, and we're simply providing a regional total as a whole. And just to note, there are memos on both the transit safety and the highway safety more details information in memos that were attached to today's meeting documents. So these were the targets adopted for the board by the board last year. You can see the 6 modes we're concerned about in this region down the left: heavy rail, streetcar in DC, the urban bus, which sticks together most of the local bus providers, commuter bus, demand response, think the paratransit vehicles, and then van pools even. Consistently, since we've been doing this for 3 years now, every agency has always set a target of 0 for fatalities, and so the rate is 0 as well. But we do anticipate several hundred reportable injuries. We do anticipate several hundred safety events, particularly in the bus environment where we're interacting with a lot of other vehicles. And then reliability, that miles between failure MDBF target over there. So these were the targets last year. I'll speak to this quickly. Transit agencies don't actually have to report their performance against those targets, though they keep a record of it in-house. So instead, we get the safety data from another source. They do report information to the FTA's National Transit Database, or NTD. And so you can see what happened in 2022. Unfortunately, we did have a handful of fatalities associated with transit in the region, 2 on heavy rail, 4 on urban bus, and I've underlined those numbers where they exceeded targets. We did have several hundred reportable injuries and several hundred safety events. I will say that with the pandemic, data has been very affected. We still haven't reached sort of a normal steady state yet. So just recapping that, again, the FTA doesn't require reporting, so sometimes getting this information, making sure it's appropriate with the definition is somewhat challenging. But the data that is submitted for specifically the safety section, all providers set targets of 0, even though the region typically experiences several each year. Injuries for heavy rail at Metro were significantly lower than target, which is good. Safety events, however, for heavy rail, streetcar, commuter bus, and demand response did exceed targets. Streetcar had a goal of target of 0 and they had 1, so they did exceed their target. But again, with the pandemic, this rule started implementation in 2020. With the onset of the pandemic, FTA offered waivers, which some agencies took advantage of. Many agencies still had very reduced service in 2021, even into 2022. So the experience with implementation of this rulemaking has still been challenging, and a lot of agencies are continuing to make improvements as they go along, but it's been somewhat of a rough go. These are the targets that we're proposing for 2023 based on the information from the local agencies. So again, every agency sets a target of 0 for fatalities. However, we do expect several hundred reportable injuries in the region. You can see the information there. Again, several hundred reportable safety events. And then MDBF reliability target. I will say that this year, the demand response and van pool agencies have decided to set targets for 0 because they're really not getting good data from the providers, and so they don't have any hard data on which to set targets. So they've gone with a target of 0, knowing that they're going to exceed that target. Again, these are the draft targets. We'll take board feedback, any additional information we get in the next several weeks, and then you'll be asked to approve them at the December 20th meeting. That concludes my portion of the presentation, and I'll turn it over to my colleague, Ms. Nam.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the board. I'm here today to brief you on our regional highway safety targets. Similar to the transit safety targets, the federal government requires MPOs to review roadway safety performance and to set roadway safety targets each year for our region. So I'll be spending a few minutes today providing an overview of the federal requirement for target setting, followed by a review of our region's performance against the 2018 to 2022 safety targets, and finally sharing staff recommendations for the next set of regional safety targets. Provide some background. The requirement to set safety targets was established by an FHWA final rule issued in 2016, and the rule requires state DOTs and MPOs to adopt annual safety targets in 5 performance categories and to measure and report on progress towards those targets on a yearly basis. State DOTs must report their targets each year by August 31st, and MPOs are to report their safety targets within the following 180 days. The requirement is intended to help states carry out provisions of the Highway Safety Improvement Program, or HSIP, which requires states to apply a data-driven and strategic approach to improving safety on public roads. And note that while the final rule refers to the targets as highway safety targets, they apply to all public roads regardless of ownership or functional class. The 5 performance measures that state DOTs and MPOs must set targets for are the number of fatalities, the rate of fatalities per 100 million vehicle miles traveled, or VMT, the number of serious injuries, the rate of serious injuries per 100 million VMT, and the number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries, and these must all be reported as 5-year rolling averages. The federal final rule allows states and MPOs to develop their own methodology for setting targets, and for the National Capital Region, TPB staff uses an approach that combines the methodologies of each state. In a nutshell, the methodology we used applies each state's methodology to their respective portions in our region and then combines them into a regional composite target. For those measures where this methodology resulted in higher targets than the previous year, we cap them so that we don't recommend a higher target this year than was adopted last year. In the next few slides, I'll review the region's progress towards the 2018 to 2022 roadway safety targets. As part of staff's preparation of this year's safety targets, we gathered and reviewed crash data for 2022. We do not yet have a complete regional VMT dataset for 2022, so the 2021 VMT figures were used pending availability of those numbers. And I'll add that the 2021 figures are about 89% of pre-pandemic levels. This table shows our regional safety outcomes by year from 2018 through 2022, with the last column showing the percent change for each measure since last year. As you can see, the number of fatalities in our region continued to increase in 2022, though at a slower rate than in 2021, when fatalities increased by 13%. In addition, after an increase in serious injuries in 2021, serious injuries headed back in the right direction in 2022. The largest increase was seen in the number of non-motorist fatalities and serious injuries, which increased by approximately 23% in the same period. This chart provides some additional context for our regional performance regarding traffic fatalities. Without minimizing these fatalities, it shows that we continue to remain well below the national fatality rate. And again, the 2022 fatality rate is an interim number pending updated VMT figures, which is why you see it in a different color there on that chart. Compared to the 2018 to 2022 regional safety target set by TPB in January of 2022, our region fell short of meeting the targets for all 5 categories. The fatality and serious injury rates may adjust slightly when we receive updated VMT figures, but staff doesn't expect that it will change the status of those targets. In all, the data shows that the rate that fatalities and serious injuries are increasing is moderating compared to previous years. Fatalities continue to stay elevated, but they are increasing at a slower rate. It suggests that they may be leveling off, but more data is needed to establish the trend. And after an increase in 2021, serious injuries began to head back in the right direction in 2022. Finally, the rise in non-motorist fatalities and serious injuries is notable. It is the highest annual increase since at least 2006, which is the earliest that staff has crash data. Because this target data has only recently become available, staff is still working to understand the nature of the crashes. We're currently planning for a safety study to be conducted in the upcoming year, similar to the safety study completed in 2020, and we'll brief this board on findings as soon as they become available. I'll also note that there is a memo in today's mail-out packet that provides additional context for our safety performance, including TPB safety programs and safety efforts by our member jurisdictions. Based on projections provided by our state partners, staff calculated the following targets. This table shows what our targets would be if we didn't apply that last step in our methodology, which is the cap on the results. And this table shows the targets after the cap is applied. These are the targets that staff are recommending for the TPB's consideration. That is, we propose to keep the fatality targets at the same level as the targets set last year, while reducing the targets related to serious injuries, the serious injury rate, and non-motorist fatalities and serious injuries. And this table puts the proposed targets into context with the targets that the TPB previously set. Following today's presentation, staff will then finalize the transit and highway safety targets based on any final information and board feedback received. And then we'll be back in December to formally request the board's approval. And now I'll turn things over to Ms. Jordan Holt of WMATA, who's going to speak about safety efforts at that agency.
Before we begin the I'm sorry, Ms. Holt. Before we begin the WMATA presentation, I wanted to provide an opportunity for questions regarding the first 2 presentations, and then we'll go into the WMATA report. Were there any questions from any of the jurisdictions?
Mr. Chairman, hi, Dave Snyder, Falls Church, did have a question.
Yes, sir, please.
Thank you. In the past, when we have finalized these unfortunate goals that we're not even meeting, we listed things that we're doing or plan to do to meet and exceed goals in the future. I'm wondering if we can make a similar sort of effort when this comes before us for final action. Obviously, these numbers are tragic and unacceptable. So thank you.
I don't know if anyone wanted to respond to the question.
Yes, Mr. Collins. Thank you, Mr. Snyder. Yeah, we concur that this regrettably is particularly on the roadway safety fatalities and serious injury crashes. This is really not acceptable, and the TPB has been focusing on trying to change the trajectory on this. There are some work activities that we have already planned within the existing budget that we will be undertaking now that the 2022 data is now certified data has become available. We do intend to take a deeper dive into that data for a couple different perspectives. One, examining if our residents in the equity emphasis areas are disproportionately represented in this data set, and to better understand what the special needs there may have. The second thing is, as you probably observed from Janie's presentation, the non-motorist fatalities and serious injuries, and that is essentially pedestrians and bicyclists. That went up by 23% in 2022. It's the highest increase since 2006. So we are trying to understand what happened. In spite of that increase, the targets, the draft targets that staff is proposing does not increase those rates. So we are able to still adopt a target that is tougher than the current target. And that is because in the previous 4 years, there was a reduction, but in 2022, there was a big increase. So that's another activity that we have planned to better understand what is happening on our roadways and on our trails and on our bike trails as well. So a couple of activities, and then for next year, in the next calendar year, every year we try to bring in or hold a forum or a webinar where we look at some best practices. We try to bring in the state safety engineers to try to understand what they are doing at the state level. So that is another activity that we do plan to conduct next year.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any further questions?
Mr.
Yes.
Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Kristen Umstadt, Loudoun County. Do we have information as to how many of these pedestrian and bicycle crash cases occur after dark versus during daylight hours?
Hello, Ms. Olmsted. We don't currently have that breakout, but that is something that we can explore once we collect the data from each of the state DOTs and jurisdictions.
Very good. The reason I ask is I wonder if a large percentage of those crashes occur during night or early morning. I wonder if we should be doing a public information campaign. I know in Leesburg, where I am from, we have a significant number of folks going to work early in the morning on foot or by bicycle. In general, folks are wearing dark clothing without any reflective strips. And I wonder if they understand the danger that puts them in. And I wonder whether we should be putting out information in, for us, it would probably be in Spanish to educate folks that they should wear, they might want to wear white clothing or have reflective vests or strips on their clothing. We have not done that. I don't know if other jurisdictions have done that, but it is an issue out where we are in Loudoun County. So any thoughts you have on that would be helpful. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. That is a contributing factor, we know, for crashes in our region. So once we have had an opportunity to look at the numbers, We'll circle back.
Thank you, Ms. Umstead. Additionally, I would like to point out about maybe it was 3-4 years ago, TPB member Matt Letourneau chaired a task force of the Council of Governments on traffic incident management. And that part of it looked at the fatalities and the crashes. And that task force had a set of recommendations for the region's considerations. And one of them was holding a federally developed assessment testing or the maturity model, as they call it. We held such a seminar earlier this year, maybe last month. But there were a couple other such ideas, and we'll be happy to bring that back to see which of those are particularly focused on improving roadway safety outcomes.
Okay. Any other questions?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Takis Corridons from Arlington County. First, allow me a comment. In my community here in Arlington, we have had this conversation about, walking while dark, right? And really, we cannot ask walkers and pedestrians and cyclists to dress in an appropriate way while we don't ask drivers with emphasis to behave safely, to not race, to not buy very, very heavy and unsafe cars like they're doing right now massively. So I think that the onus for traffic safety falls in the very first place on drivers and on us, on designers of the transportation system. We need roads that are designed to be safe by design, and we need drivers who will have to curb their appetite for fast and unchallenged driving. But that said, I wanted to ask one question. The question is, do we see any correlation between the tendency to buy SUVs, to buy heavier, taller, bigger cars, and the number or gravity of crashes, injuries, and fatalities?
We have seen lots of research and reports showing some kind of correlation. I'm stopping short of seeing a causation at this time, but some sort of correlation between the increase in the size of vehicles produced by manufacturers and the rise in fatalities. Our safety study that was conducted in 2020 did not specifically look at that issue, but we are currently developing the scope of work right now, and we're exploring all kinds of factors.
Thank you. I was even reading that heavy cars, SUVs, etc., are exempt from the strictest requirements for energy absorption and when crashing, and therefore they are even more dangerous even for the drivers and the other drivers as well in the case of a crash. I would really ask you to include that in your focus because we need to learn whether we are allowing vehicles to circulate that are inherently unfit to circulate on urban streets. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, this is Kanti. To picking up on the other point Takis made, earlier this year, I believe we had a federal representative come and brief us on the new approach to safety that the federal office is promoting. And the way I remember, there was a slide that they had, and they showed a Swiss cheese with all the holes. They said the approach should be building barriers to each of those, right? So it's not just one thing. It is, yes, it is vehicle. Yes, it is operations. Yes, it is roadway design. So they had identified all of the factors that are involved in any kind of a crash or an incident, and said all of this need to be worked on, so that is how you build some redundancy, so that if one thing fails, there's another thing that captures it, right? So being human, if a driver of a vehicle fails to follow safety practices, then there is the design that helps negate that oversight. And if that also fails, then there is something else. So building that sort of a series of the redundant elements is what is the latest trend, but we'll be happy to bring that back as well.
Thank you, Kanti. I fully, I mean, I'm, of course, I'm considering all the involved parties here, you know, all the slices of cheese and their, you know, their different, you know, contributions to safety. But I want to really, you know, insist on a hierarchy. What comes first? And design, street design is literally the first, what I see as the first priority. Thank you.
See, Mr. Edmonston from Frederick, the city of Frederick.
Yes, hello. I'm here to fill in for Alderman Russell, who can't be here today. There was, so to the idea of what we can do, the Institute or the IIHS, the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety just came out with a study that looked at vehicle design and found they were significant, that the trend towards larger and blunter vehicles has a significant negative impact on crashes and on crash survivability. I do wonder if the TPB can focus on advocacy to USDOT to see about new rules to limit that. At a state level as well, we know that certain add-ons such as bull bars can also negatively impact crash safety. It is important that we deal with lighting as well, so that way our clothing choices don't necessarily have quite as much of an impact on our safety. But we as local jurisdictions as well as the region and states are uniquely placed to advocate for safer vehicles and to eliminate some of the things that drivers are incentivized to do, or some of the options that they have that hurt our roadway safety. This, of course, would be alongside efforts that we as a region are doing to mitigate crash energies and mitigate issues around road design that can incentivize speeding, unsafe driving, as well as unsafe crossing, such as having very wide gaps between crosswalks, which makes people want to just cross wherever. These are critical issues, and we need to approach this holistically. I do think that focusing on pedestrian safety is an interesting stopgap, but ultimately the responsibility needs to come from the people who are using the vehicles that are unsafe, and not necessarily from those who might just be on a sidewalk when someone jumps the sidewalk. These are vital issues. And I really hope that we look at this from a broader viewpoint than simply either design or else PIAs for those walking and cycling.
Thank you very much for that comment and the feedback. As an MPO, we are not allowed to explicitly advocate for certain issues, but that said, I do want to mention that a few months ago, staff submitted a letter to NHTSA in response to some proposed legislation to revise the NHTSA's five-star vehicle rating system. We responded to that call with a letter indicating that the rating system as revised should incorporate and consider pedestrian impacts as well. So I did want to highlight that.
Thank you. Yeah, I should say that explicit advocacy isn't necessarily what we as an MPO could do, but rather expressing our concerns and highlighting the issues around the incentives created by the federal regulatory system, as well, and how those alter the safety environment that we operate within, and how that really inhibits us from meeting our targets.
Thank you very much for that comment. Thank you.
Ms. Umstadt, did you have another question?
Yeah, thank you. Just in response to Takis's comments, which I thought were well taken. I do believe that many of our pedestrians don't understand how invisible they are at night to people driving cars. And so where I would never want to mandate any kind of clothing choice, but I don't think people understand that they will not be seen by the drivers of vehicles if they are wearing dark clothing, if they are crossing mid-street outside a crosswalk. So that's why I wondered whether anyone in the region has a public information campaign underway just to let people know they will not be seen by many drivers if they are in dark clothes. And that's my only point. I'm not suggesting that we require it, just that we educate the public on how they just are not being seen by drivers, even drivers in small cars going 25 miles an hour. That is my point. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions?
Yes, Gary Ehrenrich from Montgomery County. Thank you very much. Previously, previous years, we have also had a discussion on the impact and the importance of buckling up and dealing with inebriated and drivers that were inebriated, and what percent of the fatalities were associated with those instances. And if I recall, it's a relatively high amount, a high percent. And so part of the issue of follow-up that we need to do is we need to address how we're enforcing, how we have campaigns to get people to buckle up and to continue to work with organizations that are out there on drunken driving and on driving under the influence. The second point, Mr. Chairman, that I wanted to ask staff for is also previously I've asked and we've gotten information that each state has very different statistics and performance on safety. And one of the questions, and also based on which county you're in and the land use associated with it. And so I think it's important that the regions see why certain jurisdictions are outperforming and certain jurisdictions are underperforming, on these safety metrics. Because I think we need to understand, the investments that need to be made, the public education, and look at the policies of the region and programming. So my request, Mr. Chairman, would be in the future to ask staff to look at breaking the data up by jurisdiction and by county, so that we can have a better understanding of what the regional picture is. Thank you.
I think that's a excellent suggestion, and I sense that staff will be able to respond to that accordingly.
Mr. Chair, we can pull the data that is available from either the federal database or the local database at whatever level. One thing I would caution, though, is just because data is made available between a couple of jurisdictions does not automatically lend itself to making a fully informed comparison and drawing informed inferences. The geography, the design, the roadway conditions, the patterns, the timing of those fatalities are serious. There's a number of variables. It might be good information to see what's happening in one jurisdiction, but I don't know if it would be enough to say this jurisdiction's design standards are better than somebody else's or vice versa. I would just caution that. We can definitely pull up some data that we can gather. Thanks.
And I want Ms. Holt to please, bear with us. I mean, when we started the questioning, we were a little ahead, and so now we're getting close to almost being behind. So do we have any further questions? Because I want WMATA to do their presentation. Again, Ms. Holt, I apologize, but I was trying to fill time a little bit. But please, if you could do your presentation, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm Jordan Holt. I'm the Director of Performance at Metro, and I work closely with our safety department to set the targets for that you got a preview of from Eric's presentation. So today I'm going to kind of peel back the curtain a little bit and tell you about our process for those targets that we share with TPB and that are an input into the regional target setting process, as well as some of the performance results that we've been seeing and what we're doing to improve. Next slide, please. So Eric already gave a bit of a preview, but we have federal requirements. It's to set target annually, and it's to use a data-driven process. With the bipartisan infrastructure law, we have some more detailed requirements coming and guidance coming out through that. One is that a preference that we use in terms of data-driven, that we use a baseline of 3 years and then set a percentage improvement over that baseline. To determine the particular target, we also look at our peer benchmarks. So looking at that national transit-based data that Eric mentioned to see how we fare relative to our peers. We look at trend data over the 3-year or longer period. So have trends been kind of going in the undesired direction or in the desired direction? And then we also look at what we're doing, what actions we're taking, what resources we have available, as well as what risks are out there. And then part of our process is to engage with a joint labor management safety committee to make sure we're getting their input and buy-in on the targets as well. Next slide, please. In terms of our timeline, really we start target setting in the spring, so in the March, April, May timeline, and it's really tied in with the development of our agency safety plan. We published our first agency safety plan in 2021, and we're one of the first agencies to do so, so we're pretty proud of that. And then we update it annually, and part of that plan is the targets that we set. So I mentioned we start in the spring, where we're gathering our inputs, which I mentioned previously, and then really start in the kind of April, May timeframe, reaching out to internal stakeholders. So for example, we have some targets related to the reliability of our vehicles. So we work closely with our bus maintenance and railcar maintenance teams to discuss kind of different options for targets. And we culminate the process with the recommended targets in June and July where we get our senior executive team and our joint labor management and safety committee team to review our proposals and provide guidance on what the final target should be. Then you can kind of see the remaining approvals and discussions kind of happen through the end of the year when we publish our agency safety plan in December. Next slide, please. This is a very similar table to what you saw from Eric. It includes the targets that we've set for fiscal year 24. And you'll see here we have kind of one more measure here than Eric showed, and that's assaults. And that's because that's a requirement coming down the path from FTA. We decided to start measuring that and setting a target against it this year as well. So I won't go into too much detail here, but you can see we set targets by mode. We do counts and rates. The rates are scaled to the level of service we provide. So it's per 10 million vehicle revenue miles. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we like to leverage peer data, and we use the same data set that Eric was mentioning, so the National Transit Database. And here what I'm showing is for 4 measures specific to Metro Rail, how we compare to our peers. And the peers here that are contained in that kind of larger light blue bar are BART in San Francisco, MARTA in Atlanta, SEPTA in Philadelphia, MBTA in Boston, CTA in Chicago, LA Metro, as well as New York City Transit. And we use this data to help us, one, communicate to our stakeholders, to put the recommended targets into context, because sometimes, you know, a rate of 2.0 is hard to know, is that good, is that bad, kind of, so to put that into context. And then also use it to kind of calibrate those improvement factors. If we're already kind of a leader amongst our peers, you know, maybe we'll aim for a 3% or a 5% improvement, versus if we see we have a lot of room to improve relative to our peers, maybe aim for more of a larger improvement, like a 10% or greater improvement. So just some highlights here. You can see for collisions and derailments, these are specific safety events that we report. We've seen improvement when we compare 2022 to 2018. And we're notable, we're performing kind of better than most of our peers. Customer injuries and employee injuries, we've seen some slight increases compared to where we were in 2018. However, on the customer injury side, we remain very favorable to our peers. And on rail, on the employee injuries are kind of in the middle of the pack. I also think it's interesting to look at kind of how our trends compare, kind of the shape of our line compares to the shape of the our peer lines. And when you look at derailments, kind of we bucked the trend. We saw fewer derailments in 2022 when we saw our peers, that was an increasing trend amongst some of our peers. Next slide, please. So one thing we do is we are an agency that do try and provide some regular reporting on our safety performance. We have quarterly board meetings, or board meets more regularly than quarterly, but on a quarterly basis, we take to the board some of our safety results to discuss and share what we're doing about it. So this slide shows our FY23 performance broken out by quarter for 2 of our key safety measures here. One is the system safety event rate, and the other is our customer injury rate. First, I wanted to cover the system safety event rate on Metrobus. We actually met our target for fiscal year 23, which had been set to improve 15% over a 5-year average. In FY23, we used a slightly longer baseline than 3 years just to bridge that pandemic period. We felt that was a better comparator to look at. On Metro Rail and Metro Access, we ended up not meeting our target for the fiscal year, but the good news is you can see we really improved over the course of the fiscal year. So that's another thing we're looking at. I can highlight on Metro Access, there was a really targeted safety campaign that was data-driven and using kind of what we know about a lot of the incidents that we were and events that we were experiencing, and really communicated daily safety messages, safety reminders, and that's partially behind that decrease. Just another note about Metrobus, the main safety events there, these are collisions. We had 185 major collisions on Metrobus in fiscal year 23. We had 185 safety events in fiscal year 23, and all but 8 of those were collisions. And about 2/3 of our collisions are what we deem as non-preventable, which means the driver couldn't have done anything else really to change the outcome there. So one thing we do like is partnering with the regional staff to make our streets safer, because that also improves the performance of our fleet and for our customers. On customer injuries, we had a really strong performance over fiscal year 23, where we met target for all 3 of our modes. And on rail in particular, had, despite a kind of 40% increase in ridership in fiscal year 23, had fewer injuries, a fewer number of injuries on our rail system than we did in fiscal year 22. And the biggest decrease there was in slips, trips, and falls on our escalator system. Next slide, please. Wanted to, is there another slide? Or is that it? Okay, here we go. So one more slide, or 2 more slides here. Wanted to cover the customer and employee assault rate on Metro Rail. This is one where we've seen a nice decreasing trend since a spike in mid fiscal year 22. In this case, this covers both assaults on our employees and assaults on our customers. Most of assaults are customer-to-customer assaults, and we've really seen a decrease in employee assaults. We've been focused for several years now on de-escalation training, which is something the FDA has called out in its bipartisan infrastructure law as a risk reduction strategy, and have seen some improvement there. And the final slide, please, is on the Metrobus customer and employee assault rate. Unfortunately, this is moving in the different direction than we would like to see, but it's also predominantly customer-on-customer assaults that is driving this result. We saw a 50% increase in customer assaults in fiscal year 23 compared to fiscal year 22, but we're pleased that the number of assaults on employees actually decreased from 9 to 5. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jordan. Mr. Collins, you're back. Thanks.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, sir, we can.
Good, good. Yeah, my video doesn't seem to be following the direction of everyone else. So.
Okay. Ms. Jordan just concluded her briefing.
Okay. All right, so are there any questions from any of the jurisdictions? I see Brian Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Brian Lowell, Maryland. A couple of my constituents raised the question of police force and size of police force for Metro Rail, Metro Bus, and there's a concern that the size is not adequate. Can you address that at all?
I can just comment that I know through fiscal year 23, we've been supplementing our police force with partnerships with jurisdictional police forces to help them help us patrol key areas at key times, and at select stations have also supplemented with kind of private security contracted officers.
Thank you for that. The concern is that of course they would like their tax dollars to go to increasing their own police forces. And is there anything the jurisdictions can do to support the Metro Transit Police Force being supported for additional positions for the force itself and not with the assistance of others?
This is all, I think, tied up, as was alluded earlier, into our funding discussion as well. So I think as you know, part of our operational funding goes to support safety and security in the system as well. So that's a consideration as we look to funding in FY25 and beyond.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further questions?
I don't see any hands raised in the chat, Mr.
Okay. All right. The next item is the 2023 Enhanced Mobility Grant Program. Nicholas Ramphos will do this briefing on the solicitation and project selection process for the Federal Transit Administration's Section 5310 Enhanced Mobility for Seniors and Individuals with Disabilities Program for the District, Virginia, and Maryland urbanized areas. The board will be asked to approve the recommended projects for funding and inclusion in the TIP at the December meeting. So this will be the 6th round of these awards. And we'd also like to thank Vice Chair Christina Henderson for having chaired this process. Thank you again. So
Okay,
if you
thank
could
you,
at this
Mr.
time, Nick, please get started.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what I'd like to do this afternoon is just give you an overview of the selection process. There's also a memorandum in today's agenda packet that pretty much gives the purpose of the program as well as a recap of what I'm going to present to you this afternoon. I also would just want to give a shout out to two of my staff people, Mohammed Khan and Sharice Sansbury. They both have essentially shepherded this process through over the last few months. And they're also here in case there are any technical questions that may come up. Okay, so the purpose of the Enhanced Mobility Program, which is the Section 5310 program, as it's known in the federal government arena over at the Federal Transit Administration, is to essentially, as Mr. Chairman mentioned, is to assist individuals with disabilities as well as senior citizens and low-income individuals with transportation options. So I'm going to give an overview of that. Also, a review of the solicitation process and the action that will be taken in December by the board. And that does say November, and that will be corrected. It should be December on that slide. On the overall process, there is a coordinated plan, and FTA does require this plan in order to guide the implementation of the Enhanced Mobility Program, and this plan is updated every 4 years. It's developed with input from our Access for All committee, and it was most recently updated this past year. And it is available on the website, on the COG website. The program also aims to tackle unmet needs, which includes expanding the availability and coordination of transportation options, increasing awareness of existing transportation services, as well as improving accessibility of transportation options and making those options more affordable and sustainable. So all of these kind of feed into each other, the strategies, the recommended project types. There is a biannual solicitation that we conduct, and these are all focused to meet these transportation needs. There's also a process and goal. As I mentioned earlier, that we have the coordinated plan, which identifies the needs, it provides strategies, and it prioritizes those projects. And the Section 5310 Enhanced Mobility Program is the mechanism for funding those projects. And the solicitation that we currently did this year is held on a biannual basis. And again, the overall goal is to improve the mobility of older adults and individuals with disabilities. So when we're looking at the Coordinated Human Transportation Plan and the overall solicitation, the selection committee makes the funding recommendations to the TPB based on 7 selection criteria. And each of those criteria have associated points with them, and that includes the coordination amongst agencies, the responsiveness to the actual human services transportation plan, the institutional capacity to manage and administer an FTA grant, project feasibility, the need in the region for the project, as well as addressing the emphasis areas, and a customer focus and involvement. And once each of those areas, those selection criteria are examined, points are assigned up to that level that's shown on this particular table. The Access for All Committee also identifies priorities of the most significant unmet transportation needs. And the selection committee is also asked to take a look at those needs and to understand in order to understand what types of projects are more beneficial to the region as a whole. So those priorities include mobility management, coordinated planning efforts, travel training, door-through-door escorted transportation service, increased access to transit stations, increased wheelchair accessible options in taxi and ride-hailing services, volunteer driver programs, as well as tailored transportation service for clients of human service agencies, which really boils down to vehicle acquisition on the capital side. As part of the eligibility criteria, the projects have to benefit populations in the urbanized area. And TPB has a unique role to prioritize and select, while the Council of Governments, who's our administrative agent, actually implements the program. There's approximately $5 million a year in matching grants, and the match requirements are 20% for capital or mobility management and 50% for operating. And you can see this map. This is the urbanized area. So projects must originate and serve citizens in that urbanized area. And that's the darker blue component. So when we're taking a look at the 2023 solicitation, we had contacted over 3,000 organizations or individuals. We received a record number of applications this go around, which was 30 from 27 separate organizations, representing about $15.6 million in requested federal dollars. And we only have $2.2 million available in federal funding. So we had essentially $1.53 requested for every dollar that was available. And we had over 100 wheelchair accessible vehicle requests. So as you can see from that chart, this is just record breaking. And part of that is that there's additional funding that's available. And so that really attracted a lot more organizations to apply. And we had a lot of new organizations that applied as well. We do have a selection committee that's part of the process. And we like to thank Council Member Christina Henderson, who's also the TPB's vice chair. She helped coordinate the selection committee. And we did have representatives from the District of Columbia, from the DC Department of General Services, from Maryland, from MDOT, and also from Virginia, from VDRPT. And then we also had a national expert from US Aging that served on the selection committee. And we'd like to thank all of those individuals because they really spent quite a bit of time pouring through all of the documents and making their selections, as well as meeting to discuss the pros and cons of each of those applications. We do have a timeline. So as I mentioned, we did meet, selection committee did meet last week. We will be looking for TPB approval in December And that should say December 20th. And these successful applicants are given 30 days to complete the FTA required paperwork. That'll go through January once they're selected. And the approval from FTA can take up to 9 months. And then once that occurs, we'll be looking at putting together sub-grant agreements for each of the subrecipients. And then the project should begin by spring of 2025. And the earliest possible delivery of vehicles would be in August of 2025. And then we would be gearing up for our next solicitation, which would be in the summer of 2025. And before we take any questions, I'd also would like to defer to Councilmember Henderson in the event you'd like to add anything to this presentation.
I don't see Mr. Henderson yet.
Yeah, maybe she didn't hear. Okay, in any event, happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions at this time?
I don't see any online, Mr. Collins.
Okay. Well, again, Nick, thank you for the presentation.
Okay, thank you.
And this will be addressed at the December meeting.
Yes.
Okay. The final item on the agenda is a Visualize 2050 update.
Hey, good afternoon, Chair Collins and members of the board. As noted, my name is Christina Finch, and I am the new Transportation Planning Manager at TPB. I am happy to be overseeing the development of the next iteration of the National Capital Region Transportation Plan, Visualize 2050, and I appreciate the opportunity to provide you with an update today. I'll begin by providing you with an overview of the content that I will share today. First, I'll start at a high level, reminding everyone about the relationship between key TPB documents and the broader planning and programming process. Next, I will provide an overview of the previous key milestones in Visualize 2050 plan development process, followed by a review of the goals, objectives, and schedule for plan development. I will recap how stakeholders and the public have been engaged in the plan development process thus far and discuss the technical inputs process. And lastly, I will touch on the financial, air quality, and system performance analyses. Okay, so the two main products of the Transportation Planning Board are the National Capital Region Transportation Plan and the Transportation Improvement Program. The NCRTP is the region's policy document for short and long-term strategies to improve transportation between now and 20+ years. The TIP is a budget document that describes the planned federal funding obligations for investments to be implemented in the first 4 years of the plan. You can see in the graphic, the top row represents the 20+ year regional transportation plan, Visualize, including its key policies, projects, and programs that collectively aim to help the region's transportation system achieve the future vision and goals. On the second row in green, the bottom left box represents the immediate next 4-year transportation improvement program, documenting the committed funding for projects included in or consistent with the transportation plan. The longer bottom right green box represents all the future 4-year transportation improvement programs that align with the transportation plan. Projects or project phases listed in the transportation plan fall within either of the bottom two boxes. They either have programmed and committed funding and thus will have dedicated funding sources listed in the Transportation Improvement Program. If funding has not yet been committed and programmed, these future projects or project phases are included in the plan if future funding is reasonably anticipated. So a little bit of history. The board was already thinking about the next update to the Regional Transportation Plan even before it approved Visualize 2045. In July 2021, the board directed staff to initiate the next plan update immediately after the current plan's approval with a target completion date of 2024. In June 2022, the board approved the current plan, Visualize 2045, and staff began preparing for Visualize 2050. And I will highlight some of those key preparations later in my presentation. Then in February of this year, the board solicited technical inputs for Visualize 2050 from localities, states, transit, or other related agencies in the region. At the same time, staff initiated a public comment period for members of the community to provide feedback on projects that were undergoing a re-examination by project sponsors to consider if the project was indeed the best way to address the issues intended. In April 2023, the board approved a 6-month extension to provide more time for stakeholders to address key regional issues related to Metro funding and the Maryland op lanes. The comment period for public input on projects from the 2045 plan was also extended. A key resolution to the update of the transportation plan was adopted by the board in June 2021, which specified key elements of plan development. The first involves a consideration of multiple build scenarios and analysis of their impact on the region's adopted goals and targets. TPB staff for many years and over a decade have conducted lengthy scenarios to consider the what-ifs about different aspects of the future. Those scenarios were summarized last year and provided to agencies as they develop projects and provide TPB with their best proposals for addressing the region's transportation-related issues. The second involves the concept of zero-based budgeting, where all projects without programmed funding in the current plan must be resubmitted for consideration in the next plan. I will discuss this more in future slides. Lastly, it states that this information will inform this next and future updates of the transportation plan, which is exactly what is taking place for Visualize 2050. The goal for development of Visualize 2050 is to communicate to the board and to the public agencies' current efforts and subsequent priorities to provide all stakeholders in the National Capital Region with a common foundation for advancing transportation. The region's transportation stakeholders are working continuously to study the issues, evaluate strategies, and identify the best solutions to fund. So these are the objectives for plan development. First, to document the current system, identify the major issues people experience when using the system, recognize the relationship between transportation and key societal topics and considerations for future planning, present the investments programmed for implementation, highlight the projects, programs, studies intended for funding pursuit and technical development over the next several years to enable future implementation. Ensure the planned investments can be reasonably achieved with anticipated funding availability. And finally, to guide the region's collective transportation efforts to achieve positive outcomes for everyone. This graphic shows the 3-year schedule for developing Visualize 2050. Starting from when the current plan was adopted in 2022 to when the new plan will be finalized in 2025. The top row indicates the stages of technical and policy work, including the re-examination of current projects for consistency with TPB's goals and priorities, the submittal of projects and other technical inputs from transportation agencies, the various analyses from TPB staff, and finally, writing the plan and online materials. The bottom part of the graphic describes the public participation process, starting with the current phase that we are still in, which is gathering public input on 2045 projects undergoing agency review for submittal to the 2050 plan. In March, the formal 30-day public comment period will provide community members with the opportunity to provide feedback on the regionally significant for air quality investments local, state, and transit agencies are proposing to address transportation issues in the region, as well as the land use inputs and air quality analysis scope of work. In a little over a year, in April 2025, the National Capital Region Transportation Plan and the associated 4-year program of detailed financial investments will be available for public comment prior to the board's consideration of plan, program, and subsequent air quality conformity approval anticipated in June of 2025. The TPB has an incredible history of policy development, and early on in the plan development process, TPB staff reviewed the many policy elements referenced in the 2045 plan and synthesized them into a single policy framework. This framework describes the TPB's principles, essentially the values that the TPB members collectively hold, including equity, accessibility, sustainability, prosperity, and livability. Each of these principles is described in this framework. The framework also describes the TPB goals, which are what the TPB aims for the region to accomplish for our future transportation system. Safety, reliability, maintenance, affordable and convenient, efficient system operations, environmental protection, a resilient region, and livable and prosperous communities. To accomplish these goals, member organizations and related transportation agencies will implement priority strategies, including multimodal transportation projects, programs, policies, and technologies. The successfulness of these strategies will be measured according to data and against targets, including those that the board was briefed on earlier this meeting related to highway and transit safety performance. In various ways, TPB staff have been engaging member stakeholders. Many resources are available on the TPB website, including the Voices of the Region summary and the Scenarios Analysis summary. In March, TPB staff held state-specific listening sessions with board members and state, local transit agency technical staff. In September, TPB staff initiated Q&A bi-monthly sessions to assist member staff with their project inputs. These sessions will continue through December. TPB staff began receiving the first draft financial data from agencies in the spring, and coordination is an ongoing process both with finance staff and technical staff as TPB staff assess if project expenditures appear reasonable given anticipated revenues. Of course, TPB subcommittees continue to meet on a regular basis to engage topic-specific staff around the region in technical discussions and information sharing to ultimately support future investment decisions. For much of the year now, you have been receiving monthly updates on public comments received on Visualize 2045 projects that are being re-examined by each member agency for consistency with regional goals and priority strategies. We are in the last couple weeks of that comment period. As of the first of this month, TPB received 962 comments and 133 suggestions for new projects, which have also been shared with each state as well as at technical committee meetings. The top 3 projects to receive comments have been the Op Lanes Maryland Phase 1, the new Long Bridge to be built between Virginia and DC, and I-270 Innovative Congestion Management. TPB staff have also shared online and through social media engagement efforts that have been taking place through your agencies, including the Maryland annual tours and project-specific meetings like the American Legion Bridge. We especially appreciate the extra effort some members have taken to host Visualize 2050 meetings to review potential investments in their localities. This table communicates the timeline for agencies to submit inputs to the TPB for inclusion in the travel demand model, the air quality analysis, the financial analysis, and ultimately in the plan and program. The left column separates projects by whether they are regionally significant for air quality or not. The middle column refers to projects with committed funding and currently programmed through FY29. The right column is for projects with reasonably anticipated funding to be programmed in FY30 through FY50. Due dates for agency submission to TPB staff also vary according to the project or financial details needed. Essentially, highway or transit projects that impact system capacity, either more capacity or less capacity, are those that are regionally significant for air quality. Projects such as state of good repair, roadway enhancements like roundabouts, or bicycle pedestrian projects that don't impact vehicle travel lanes are all examples of not regionally significant for air quality improvements that we would like to reflect in the plan, but those details are not needed for the travel demand model. Thus, there is more time to submit those project inputs. And the due dates I'll highlight are there on the table. To summarize, the zero-based budgeting approach to Visualize 2050 includes each locality, state, and transit agency reviewing the projects to ensure the investments proposed are the best solutions to address transportation issues, and that in that process, agency staff have considered the TPB's priority strategies to meet regional transportation goals. The resubmission of project details is undergoing a thorough QA/QC review by TPB staff, and as of November 7th, agencies have submitted 79 inputs for staff review, and they keep coming. The ZBB approach will undoubtedly yield better information overall on technical inputs. Locality, state, and transit agency staff are to be thanked profusely for their efforts. Specific to the financial analysis, the ZBB approach involves each agency reviewing and updating project cost estimates and considering all types of investments. As I described earlier in the project input schedule, the financial analysis reflects investments that are regionally significant for air quality or not, investments that have been committed and programmed in the short term, as well as future investments that are reasonably anticipated to be funded. For any project that is not regionally significant for air quality, it is possible agencies may choose to list a project individually or continue project grouping categories for similar types of projects. Each input will include a total cost estimate and the amounts from each committed or anticipated funding source. And this slide reiterates the due dates for financial data. So once the board approves the necessary inputs, TPB staff will initiate the air quality analysis by developing the envisioned transportation network. Using the project inputs, staff will estimate future regional travel using a trip-based model, using the updated networks and land use data. And because the National Capital Region is a non-attainment area, and the two ingredients that form ozone are nitrogen oxides and VOCs, staff will estimate future vehicle emissions using the MOVES or Motor Vehicle Emissions Simulator Estimation Tool, and this work will take place throughout the second half of next year. And during that time, TPB staff will also assess current and future system travel performance using travel model output to determine the impacts of investments on transportation performance, including congestion or increased transit, bike, and walk trips. Finally, staff will assess the plan's impacts on people living in equity emphasis areas, which has typically happened after plan approval in order to inform planning activities and preparations for the next plan update. And so, in conclusion, as you know, TPB's work is very cyclical, and I hope my presentation today has been helpful to you in your understanding of where we are in the cycle of transportation planning and programming investments in order to address current issues while preparing for the future mobility of the National Capital Region's residents, employees, and visitors. I thank you for your time and attention today, and I'll be happy to take any questions with the remaining time that we have. Thank you.
And members, are there any questions for Ms. Fitz from the District of Columbia, the state of Maryland, and the Commonwealth of Virginia, and all our other agencies?
Okay, Mr. Chair, this is Kanti. I want to take this opportunity to once again, like Christina said, thank all the TPB member transportation agencies, all 24 member transportation agencies, and the transit agencies. They've been really hard at work for the past 6 to 8 months, because the TPB's approach this time is to go back and re-examine every single project that was in the long-range plan previously, and to reassess whether it is continued to be necessary and if those investments will be there. So I want to thank them, and I also want to thank Christina and staff. There's a number of your staff people who are working on it. Christina did a good job of identifying all the things that we have been working on for the past 6 months. And this will also be a focus for the next 6 to 8 months of our time in the next calendar year. Every time that we update the long-range transportation plan, it is a significant undertaking. But this time around, it is particularly so, given that we wanted to start with a clean slate, so to speak, with the zero-based budgeting approach. So I want to thank all of the staff who've been working on it, and all of the TPB member agency staffs as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Kanti. There aren't any further comments. At this time, we will officially adjourn the meeting. Our final meeting for 2023 is on December the 20th. Hopefully everyone will have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and we look forward to see you then just before Christmas. Thank you.
Thank you.